Welcome to the Grit.org podcast with Colby Harris and Brian Harbin. In these episodes, they speak to top achievers in athletics and business to understand the habits and mindset they apply in order to build more grit.
Welcome back to the Grit.org podcast. My name's Colby Harris. Alongside me is Brian Harbin, and we're here with today's guest, Wyatt Walker. Wyatt, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thank you guys for having me, man. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So Wyatt is a native 904 Jacksonville boy. He has been here the majority of his life. He's a standout basketball player, attended the Providence School of Jacksonville here, and ended up going on to play Division I basketball at Samford and Ohio State before playing in the G League, and is now a basketball coach as well as strength and conditioning coach at Episcopal School of Jacksonville. So we have him here today to talk all about his history in sports, strength, conditioning, advice for other athletes, navigating the process, even some time in the G League. So Wyatt, go ahead and start us off. Tell us about growing up in Jacksonville and what you really love about your hometown here.
Yeah. Jacksonville, I think, is a place that you don't really appreciate all it has to offer until you live somewhere else. I think it being so big, it can be easy to kind of only get in one part of it. But I think the best part of Jacksonville is just the diversity, a lot of different communities, a lot of different aspects around the city. And I, was born in Duval County. I grew up in St. Johns County. I worked out in World Golf Village before, and now I'm working more downtown. So I think just what brings us together is just there's just so many different things the city has to offer culturally. I think whether you're at the beach, whether you're at the town center, it's very different wherever you go, and not many other cities are like that. So I think the diversity of Jacksonville is kind of the thing I appreciate the most. I know, especially when I left and went to live in other cities and other states.
Yeah. So what was your pathway of getting into sports? Was basketball always the first love, or tell us about growing up in sports?
Yeah. I mean, I was always probably the biggest kid in most of my classes, most of my teams, and was pretty coordinated and stuff at a young age. So sports they came kind of natural to me. I played everything I could. Basketball was obviously the one I was most successful at. But yeah, I think at a young age, my athletic, abilities are what got me into it. But the thing that made me really fall in love with sports, really two things, I guess, was the competition side. I really enjoyed competing. I enjoyed, like when you won and you're in victory, and just the satisfaction of winning, and then when you lost and it just fueled you want to get back out there. And then like the teamwork side of things, I think was a big thing. I think, I didn't do a lot of individual sports, but the team sports, basketball, football, soccer, it was really just fun being on a team with other people working towards a common goal. So basketball was obviously my favorite, but I did a little bit of everything. I swam, I did gymnastics. I did a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah, well-rounded. Tell us about your shot. Okay, so when did you hit 6 feet, or tell us about when you kind of hit that growth spurt?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I was a huge baby, but I was always like the biggest kid in every class I was in. My shoe size was my age all the way up until I was 16. So I'd stopped, thank God, because finding size 18 shoes would be bad. But I think around right about 8th, 9th grade, I was probably in the 6'3" range. And then, once I was like, freshman, sophomore, I'm closer to 6'5", 6'6", and then I'm 6'8" now. So I think I stopped completely probably about senior year of high school. And yeah, it's being tall it's a blessing and a curse sometimes.
Tall family members?
My brother, we're 15 months apart, but we're the exact same height. My dad is the exact same height, and my mom's pretty tall for a woman. She's 5'10", so I'd say it's a little above average.
Yeah, definitely above average.
Yeah.
And thinking you played a bunch of different sports, like you said, and your height definitely could be helpful. Swimming, I'm sure. Soccer, probably could help a little bit with the size. I've always said it's a little bit more of a physical sport, but not like all the way over as football or lacrosse or something like that. But tell us about narrowing down your focus once you're in high school. I mean, was it always the plan to try to be a collegiate basketball player, or did that just happen naturally as you realized like you were really excelling in that sport?
Yeah. I mean, my primary two were basketball and football. I think it's easy looking back to think like, what if? I think physically my body, as I matured and got older, I think my body was probably best suited for football, just the way I move and stuff now, being on the athletic development side. But what just hooked me on basketball, honestly, Larry Bird. Larry Bird was my favorite player to watch. I just would spend hours and hours on YouTube and watching DVDs of him. And I mean, it was really more like I would see him, I would go in the driveway and try to recreate whatever I saw him do. And that just kind of what drew me to basketball, to where when I got to Providence in high school, I definitely advise athletes play as many sports as you can for as long as you can. But if you do reach to a point where you're like, this is the sport that just sets me on fire, that I enjoy more than all the other ones, I don't think it's a bad thing to go all in on that one. So that's kind of how it unfolded for me.
And we know you ended up committing to Samford to play, but kind of walk us up to that moment. Like, I know typically, was it freshman, sophomore year, you start to get noticed, or walk us through some of the highlights of high school and when you felt like kind of that tipping point was where it's like, all right, this is going to happen.
Yeah, it was, I had a very unusual high school to college transition as far as just my commitment with schools and stuff. So freshman year, started to kind of get recruited. My first few offers, JU, UNF, Georgia Southern, and then kept getting them sophomore, junior year. I had, probably 2 or 3 dozen nice, good mid-major schools, and Lehigh, Davidson, Lafayette, just some pretty good fits. And I really wanted to play high major basketball. Like, that was my goal when I was in high school. So I just kept holding out. And then going into my senior year, I had an Ivy League school, Princeton, had offered me. And, that was kind of like the biggest name, I would say. And, not in a mature way, but immaturely, every time I had brought it up in conversation, I saw people's eyes get big. So I ended up committing to Princeton prior to the start of my senior season. I played my whole senior season committed to Princeton. And then after the season was over, now we're in legitimately almost May. And, I didn't really fully understand, nor did my parents, the way the Ivy League scholarship thing kind of worked. And for people that don't know, they don't do, full ride scholarships for athletics like a lot of these other universities. So it's financial need based. And they had kind of redone our financial read package, and the number that I originally thought it was going to be and the number that it ended up being were drastically different. So it was a decision where I was like, okay, I'm not going to go through with this. So I ended up decommitting in May of my senior year, which was just, you're going to college in a month, So when I decommitted, most of the schools that were recruiting me had already filled out all their spots. So I really only had 3 schools left, and it was Samford, South Carolina, and then Bradley. And I didn't know much about Illinois, so sorry Bradley, but I didn't go there. And then South Carolina, I didn't think, was the exact best situation, but I took a visit to Samford, and it was a small Christian private school that was very similar to my high school experience. And Jay Kedrick was the assistant coach there, who I built a strong relationship with him and really believed in him. So ultimately that's what brought me there to Birmingham.
And I've got a follow-up question with that, so for a lot of, and I know you coach high school basketball too, so we'll get into that here in a minute, but so for guys that want to play at that next level in college, did they seek you out through the school? Or I know that, a lot of tournaments is a big place where guys get noticed. Kind of tell us, what is that process if you don't play at a big school, and how you can get noticed in that way?
Yeah. I mean, you'll hear a lot of people say, if you're good enough, they'll find you. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I also think you got to, do your part to expose yourself to schools. I mean, my advice to young kids looking to play collegiately, well, the first thing is obviously work relentlessly on your game, be the best possible player you can. But after that, being on a really good high school team helps, being on a really good AAU team helps. But, there's even options for kids that don't have those opportunities, where there's all these showcase and exposure camps nowadays. You got to be careful, because some of them are kind of just money grabs, but some of them legitimately, there's a lot of colleges coming. So I was lucky enough. I was on teams from a very young age with players much, much better than myself, where there was just always college coaches around. I mean, when I was in 7th grade, 8th grade, and I wasn't even playing varsity basketball at Providence yet, I'd come in the gym and Billy Donovan was there, or Coach K, or Roy Williams, and it was just like I was always around it. So I think it's difficult for kids that maybe you're in a smaller town, or maybe you're not on a loaded AAU team, but I do think there's merit in, if you're good enough, they'll find you.
There's so many ways to promote yourself these days too. Like, you make one good TikTok highlight reel, a couple million views later, you might have everyone calling.
That's true.
And one thing I want to ask you about is talking about being on good high school teams. You got really lucky with your program at Providence and had a chance to work with Grayson Allen as he was on his journey before he went to Duke, right? Duke, and then now in the NBA, and you guys still stay in touch as you were just talking about before the show. Something I want to ask you about is, thinking back on that time that you got to spend with Grayson. I'm assuming at that time you guys probably had just a killer program overall, and you're probably 2-3 years.
I'm 1 year behind him.
1 year. So you really got to see him grow. What do you think him, other recruits at that time, what do you think is some key things that you guys got to do collectively together as a team that helped all of you either move to the collegiate level or even Grayson now in the league and doing his thing?
Yeah. It's a fun question to answer. I think that, like you said, I was very, very blessed. My high school experience was not the normal. In my entire high school experience, we were 135-10. So, only lost 10 games. I can name them all right now. They still stand out. We never lost a home game. We went to the Final Four in Lakeland all 4 years I was there. So, but that environment was all built by our high school coach, Coach Martin, Jim Martin at Providence. The environment that he provided with us, in the summer, in the fall, in the winter, in the spring, it didn't matter. We were always in the gym. We there were days where we would get there. We would work a camp, for service hours in the morning, 9 to 12. We'd get lunch. We'd come back. We'd be in the camp 1 to 4. Camp would be over. We'd have team practice. Practice would be over. We'd all play pickup. Pickup would be over. We'd all get on the gun. And it was just a nonstop, relentless work environment. So I think when you take, Grayson, myself, I had a bunch of tremendous teammates there, Christian, David, that we would all just push each other. And it's kind of iron sharpens iron where, we were all competitors. People ask me all the time about Grayson, what about him makes him so good? What makes him so different? I consider myself a really heavy competitor, but I don't know that I've ever met someone as competitive as him. And, whether it was 2K, whether it was who could solve a Rubik's Cube faster, chess, it didn't matter, man. We just competed every day. And I think when you love the people around you enough that you can really go at them hard and build each other up. And then when you're off the court, you're just it's a brotherhood and you love on each other. I think that's kind of what prepared us all for success after high school.
Well, I remember him getting a little bit of heat too for that competitive nature over the years. Like he's always been known as that diehard competitor, just like going at your neck. And obviously if you're a fan of him or if you're a fan of the team he's playing for, love it. If you're not, it's not going to thrill you seeing him coming in the gym.
Yeah. People have asked me stuff in the past, but to touch on it, he wants to win more than anything. He wants to win more than anything. He's one of the greatest dudes I've ever met. He's such a good friend, but in between those lines, man, there's nothing else that matters other than winning. So
I love
he'll do whatever it takes.
I think it's awesome.
I've got 2 questions here. So the first one would be kind of in that high school mode. Obviously it's a given with the physical training and the practice and being there and showing up. But tell us about any of the mental and emotional training that you went through, or coming back from a bad game, or, when you can't really find your range or you feel like you're in a little bit slump. Tell us a little bit about how you kind of got yourself back in it mentally and emotionally in those situations.
Yeah. I think your preparation, going into practices and your preparation going into games has got to be very similar. I think that's one thing a lot of young athletes struggle with is, when it's time for a game, they have this whole pregame routine, whether it be when they eat, when they take a nap, how they stretch, their music, all that stuff. But then practice, they just kind of show up for practice. And I think that was one thing for me. I tried to always approach practice the same way I approached a game. I did a lot of visualization techniques, where I would, call it meditation, call it whatnot, but I'd go to a quiet space in whatever gym we were at, have my headphones on, do my mobility, my stretching, and just kind of visualize myself going through the game. And one thing that worked for me when I was struggling, if I, just wasn't playing well, or maybe I just, something was frustrating me, I would try to, in my head, paint 2 scenarios. I would paint, what's the worst case scenario that's going to happen tonight? Okay, I go 0 for 20, we lose by 50, and I get dunked on SportsCenter. And then what's the best case scenario? Okay, I score 50 points in the game winner, and I'm the number 1 player on SportsCenter. And then realistically, it's probably going to fall somewhere in between those two. And then lastly, just kind of having a purpose bigger than yourself and realizing at the end of the day, as fun as this is, as much as I identify, with the success in this program and in this sport, I have a purpose much bigger than just playing the game of basketball. So that's kind of what grounds you back down to where ultimately it is just a game.
Yeah, I love that. And anything that you would tell yourself during the game to stay relaxed. I know you guys are playing in some high intensity, crowd and everything else. And being tense is probably one of the worst things you could do, especially with your shot. But anything that any mantras you would tell yourself or how you'd stay relaxed?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of different things you can do to kind of just reset yourself. And I'm actually working with my girls on our high school team now of a physical reset paired with a verbal reset paired with a mental reset. And kind of what that looks like is if there's a situation where whether it's a bad call or you missed a shot or maybe just had a bad quarter, what is, something physically you can do, whether it's grabbing your jersey or wiping off your shoes, pair that with a verbal, you call it a mantra, whatever you want to call it, but something you say, and then mentally, where does that take you? And I had 2 or 3 that I would use kind of in games in high school. I had one at the free throw line, that kind of just centered me in. I remember when I was a young kid, there was different things my dad would say to me in the driveway when we were getting shots up. So in a game, if I was struggling to make a shot or just not happy with the way I was shooting it, I would just tell myself those things in the game, and that kind of brought me back to my driveway and helped me, be more at peace with it. But yeah, I think it's different for everybody. But having, at least 1, maybe 2 or 3 different resets in your head that you can kind of ground you back down in those moments is huge.
Yeah. And I think too, so much, especially when you are in that kind of leadership capacity, as soon as something potentially bad happens, all those younger guys are looking to you to how you react, and they're kind of feeding off that good and bad. So, also just being aware of what you're giving off because your teammates are feeding off that. And one of the things I wanted to ask you too, because you came a little bit, prior to all the NIL and some of the personal branding stuff, was there anything on the personal branding that you side or any on that side, or anything that you recommend your high school students in terms of the do's and don'ts in terms of the personal branding and their social media sites?
Yeah, I would say, my biggest advice would be just be yourself, be genuinely organic of who you are. Because I think ultimately, like, your brand as an individual, the more, genuine that is, the more people resonate in that. For me, when I was at NC State, I'd grown out my hair to about halfway down my back. So I had really long hair. I was, at the time, not the reason I went to NC State, but my dad was in a hunting club pretty close to Raleigh in South Carolina. So I was spending every weekend going to South Carolina hunting with my dad. So there was a lot of pictures posted on me in social media and a lot of camo hats and camo hoodies and stuff. So that kind of became my brand. And, I think it kind of ran hand in hand with how I grew up and stuff. And, I think the more that your brand is authentic to who you are, I think that's one that young kids kind of struggle with, is they'll see, whether it be professional athletes or other college athletes, and they idolize them so much that they can almost morph their brand into something that's not who they are organically. So my advice for any of those kids going through looking for NIL deals or whatnot is I think if you are just ultimately yourself and there are other brands that align with, what you pride yourself on being, I think it will come to fruition. And I look back, I'm a little salty about when I left college. Those NIL deals did not exist when I was there.
I think everyone's salty.
Yeah, we have Torin Doran's a good friend of mine, my teammate at NC State, and we both talk about it all the time, man. We missed out.
Yeah, well, it even goes back to the whole LeBron scandal when he was in high school, and that was 2002, I guess, that all that was going down, 2001 maybe, which it's crazy to think it took him 20 years to make it happen. Like, the fact that LeBron didn't wake them up enough to say, well, realistically, capitalists, I guess they knew that, we don't have to give them anything. Why would we give them anything? That lasted long enough. But I did want to ask you, moving forward, thinking about when you left Jacksonville, I know you said I'm really glad you had your dad right south of you at the hunting clubs. I'm sure that brought a piece of home with you. But looking at leaving Jacksonville, transitioning into college, tell us a little bit about that and leaving the place you'd always been, starting college ball, what those first few months were like.
Yeah, I think the transition as far as just like Jacksonville to when I went to Samford, Birmingham, and then even when I went to Raleigh, NC State, that was tough just because you're without your support system. So my wife, Maddie, we've been dating since sophomore year of high school. So being long distance from her, that was a lot. It was difficult being away from my mom, my dad, my brother, and just my friends. Like you miss those people, and just you very easily can take it for granted when you get to see them every day. So that was tough. But I think the transition from the basketball side of things, from Providence to Samford, my most difficult part on the basketball floor early on as a freshman was really just staying healthy. I had a lot of injuries, but the transition as far as playing basketball at high school and playing basketball in college, it's definitely more difficult. But for me, I think it was a little bit easier than most just because of the program that I was coming from. When we were at Providence, every year he tried to play a national schedule. And I remember my junior year, we played in the city of Palms, and we played 4 games in Fort Myers where every game the teams were loaded with NBA guys. So we had a point in time where Mount Verde was number 1 in the country. They had D'Angelo Russell and Ben Simmons, and we had them down with like 2 minutes to go. We ended up losing. And, you can't feel sorry for yourself because the next day got to go play Whitney Young and Jaleel Okafor. So when you're playing a schedule like that, the transition for me to college was a little bit easier just because I was so used to playing such high-level competition.
And when you said it was more difficult playing at Samford, can you unpack that a little bit in terms of what's so much different about the rigor of playing at college?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that some of these young kids probably lose focus on is just because, you are talented enough to play college or because you like the sport enough that you might want to play it in college. I don't think you can fully grasp how much playing a collegiate sport takes out of you until you do it. And the biggest difference is just the time commitment. And if you're not good at time management, if you're not able to sacrifice, holidays and free time and all those vacation time to be with your team in that setting, I think it can be really hard for a lot of people. So I think just being able to strategically plan your days out every single day and know, okay, every minute of my day is planned to an extent when I'm a college athlete. And then just understanding like, look, there's going to be a lot of different experiences that I, ultimately miss out on because I'm playing a college sport, but it will prepare me better on for life afterwards. So it's worth it in the long run.
How do you keep that fire stoked? Because you're not only committing everything in terms of time, physical, but as a freshman, you're coming in, you're not even really playing the games, right? So so how do you keep that, passion going during that time period?
I think it's being honest with yourself and just taking some time away to write down, what are my specific goals? Obviously you have your team goals, but you have your individual goals. I was blessed enough when I got to Samford, I got to play right away. I was a starter kind of from day one and had a pretty successful freshman year. The hardest part for me was was having a lot of different injuries. I tore my labrum in my shoulder about a month or two before the start of our season when I was a freshman. And then right when I kind of had healed that up, ready to play again, I tore my meniscus in my knee and, fought through that, got surgery there, and then still just fought my way through it and played that season. So I think that was probably the most difficult part. But what kind of just grounds you is going back to your individual goals. I think if you don't have any goals, then you're just showing up out there, just taking whatever that day gives you. But for me, I had goals, both, basketball, whether it be what I wanted our program to do as far as a winning mindset. Statistically, I had my own individual goals. And then off the court, if you don't have a balance, if it's just all basketball, you'll drain yourself out. So relying on your support system and the things that fuel you and fill you up outside of basketball.
And you said too that you had battled an injury ultimately right before heading to NC State. So you were already burned with injuries at the beginning stages of being at Samford. You touch on what injury that was that you had to go through, but what was that like getting that next injury? You took a redshirt season off, transferred to NC State. Walk us through that process, right, and everything going on at that time.
Yeah, that was difficult. My sophomore year at Samford was probably my statistically my best year of college basketball. I averaged, I think, like 14 and 10 for the season. I was at one point, I think the first 18 games of the season, I had consecutive double-doubles. So was playing at a really, really high level, and then spent that whole offseason between my sophomore and junior year just revamping my game, expanding more into a stretch four opposed to just a back to the basket center, and felt really good going into that season at Samford. We had a lot of transfers come in that had to sit out the year before, and they were ready to go. And we were looking at it ultimately like, we're going to be picked to win the league this year. We could win the Southern Conference. And, not just myself, but we had 2 different point guards, both heavy injuries that year that they ultimately redshirted as well. We had our other post player. He ended up tearing up his knee, was out that year. So 4, 5, 6 guys, I think, that ended up missing that year. So for me, I tore my meniscus in my knee. I had already done that before in my other knee as a freshman. So it wasn't anything that stressful. It was 4 or 5 weeks, do the rehab, and I was right back to playing. And ultimately, when I came back, the first game, I had went up to block a dunk, and I landed on it. And the second I landed, I felt I had just done it again. And that one was a little bit more difficult because there was already so much scar tissue in the knee. So that one put me out 3 or 4 months, and couldn't put weight on it for a long time, and getting 2 surgeries that close together. Had to do a lot of rehab. That was not fun. Underwater treadmill and picking up marbles with your toes and all that stuff. But, going through that while transferring out of Samford and trying to navigate the recruiting process for now the 3rd time really mentally took a giant toll. And it's difficult. I'm taking visits and going all these different high major schools and trying to decide where I'm going to go. And it's like, I don't even know if I can squat right now, so I think ultimately it even fueled me more just to keep working and getting better and improving. But I think, getting injured is one of mentally the toughest things I think an athlete goes through.
Mm-hmm. And so, spent your time at NC State, and then how did you kind of figure out what you wanted to do next, and that whole process with the G League? How does that all come about typically?
Mine was very, very weird. So I'd finished playing at NC State, and I honestly felt I had really given everything I could to basketball. I had given my body to it, my mind, really my spirit, and came home and did not know exactly what I was going to do. I hired an agent for basketball, Alex Tominski, great dude. And we kind of sat around with, I think now my fiance at the time, and it talked about what's the next steps look like, and debated a lot of different things. And not many people know this, but I have an uncle who's pretty close with some guys in the WWE. And I did an interview at Samford, or at NC State, in the past, where they'd asked me what I want to do after basketball. And I said, I want to be a WWE wrestler. I think people thought I was kidding, but I was so serious. And he had talked to a scout that was in Orlando at the WWE Performance Center. And they had taken a look at me, and they said, ultimately, my basketball body and what my body would need to be like as a wrestler were not the same. So they wanted me to be on this big weight gain program. So I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm done playing at NC State. I'm back home. I was cleaning pools for my JV basketball coach and bulking like a madman, working out for 2 hours a day at Bailey's Powerhouse Gym. And my playing weight at NC State was like 250, 255. And I ballooned up to like 280. And as that's going through, I randomly get a call from my agent, Alex, and he's like, hey man, he's like, the G League draft's coming up here. And I just got a call from the Austin Spurs, and they really want to take you. I think they're going to take you in the 3rd round, just make sure you're ready. And I was like, okay. I said, how long till that happens? It's like 30 days. And I'm like, okay, here we go. So completely redid my training, obviously shed a bunch of weight, got strapped back in the gym. And then G League draft day came. I was very blessed. I went in the 1st round to Oklahoma City and got to go out there for training camp right away. So ended up getting moved and went to Salt Lake City and got to be a part of some really good teams, but was not the plan from the start. So definitely an orthodox chapter of my life.
And we can't technically say the C word on the podcast. Sometimes it gets censored, but you had to go through that process through 2020 as well. What effect did that have essentially on your G League career?
Yeah, it was difficult. So I was lucky enough, man, the G League team I was on, the Salt Lake City Stars. I mean, statistically speaking, we were and still are the greatest G League team of all time. When I had got there, I think they were on like a 7 or 8 game win streak, and we ended up getting it all the way up to 18 games. So we had an 18 game win streak, which I still think still stands as the longest win streak in G League history. And we won the Vegas showcase. So, it was good and bad because we're such a good team. Minutes were scarce. Wasn't playing a whole lot, but just being in an environment around other high level professionals and studying, what their preparation and their work habits look like. But yeah, when COVID hit, I mean, all of us were just distraught. I think all my teammates all over the world, I had teammates in Italy, teammates in the G League, teammates everywhere. And it was just difficult to figure out, okay, what do I do now? So for me, when it happened, I was home, and my high school coach builds these basketball training centers called Above Basketball. And he'd asked me, why don't you train kids and run this facility for me until you go play, and maybe you go play overseas again or the G League again. And so that's what I started doing, and fell in love with coaching and never played again.
So 2 questions here. So for people that don't know what the G League, how do you typically explain that to people?
Yeah. I guess the easiest way is we are the backup dancers of NBA players. But ultimately, every NBA team has their own G League affiliate team. So I was with the Utah Jazz G League affiliate team, the Salt Lake City Stars. I was also with the Oklahoma City Thunder's G League team, the Oklahoma City Blue. And it's just a carousel. And it's a ladder of different kind of players. They have regular, just a G League contract. We have what we call Exhibit 10 guys. You have two-way guys that split time with the NBA team and the G League team. And it's just kind of a never-ending circle of right place, right time. And, I've seen guys that will go to the G League, and in 1 year they get pulled up to an NBA team. And I know Jack White, a good friend of Grayson's at Duke, just recently won an NBA championship with the Denver Nuggets. But then I've also seen guys that they'll spend a decade, 12 years in the G League just waiting for that next step, and it just ultimately doesn't happen. And it is tough because not many people know, but the G League is only 5 months out of the year, right? So those other 7 months, what does that look like for you financially? Where are you living at logistically? But yeah, it is. I think it's a great experience, for those of us that are ultimately just trying to reach the highest level. And I think the G League is definitely slept on from a talent standpoint. There are some monsters in the G League that, just all pushing each other to get better.
What, any next level type mental, physical, emotional training those guys were doing at that level? Yeah.
Yeah, big time. I think that's probably the biggest difference from college to pro is and even from high school to college, but the preparation. One of the quotes I love is failure to prepare is preparing to fail. And I think, when you get to that level, G League level, NBA level, the preparation in your body, the preparation of how much film you're watching. As a pro, any strategic advantage you can get to set yourself apart or win, you're going to take. So, these guys, the hours they're just putting in on recovery, the hours they're putting in their skill development. I think that it's just the complete holistic approach to bettering yourself as a player is what really sets the part when you're a pro.
And looking at the tail end of your career in the G League, transitioning to coaching, I know you said you were kind of working with one of the basketball centers here in Jacksonville a little bit. Tell us about that decision to essentially hang him up, and then how you transitioned out basketball into a new version on the end of coaching.
Yeah, it was unusual for me. Coaching wasn't something that I had thought about as a kid. Oh, I would love to coach or whatnot. I'd finished playing in the G League. I was the director out at Above Basketball, World Golf Village. And it was super, super fun to start at the youth level. I would train kids all the way down from kindergarten to NBA guys, and every day was different. And just training that level of kids kind of fed me as far as coaching and who I was as a coach and what I enjoyed about it. And then I also got to start a program out there called CASE, which was conditioning, agility, speed, endurance. So kind of working this pattern of every day I'm doing the basketball training, but I'm also doing strength and conditioning training. That was a lot of fun for me. And I never thought that I would be coaching. I thought my basketball career, I'd be still well into my playing days. But to be honest with you, I think I've enjoyed coaching a lot more than playing up to this point. I think, it's easy when you're playing to sometimes it get warped into the scholarships and the stats and those kind of things. But if coaching, if you're worried about yourself, you're going to be unsuccessful. So, having a purpose even bigger than yourself in that aspect, I've really, really enjoyed.
And so, tell us about kind of where you're at now, married your high school sweetheart, which is really cool. And kind of some of the sports you're coaching and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So basically, I guess kind of how it unfolded. We touched on it before, but I was working at Above. I was training kids every day. I was coaching middle school boys over at Mill Creek Academy. The Mustangs, they were fun. When I took the coaching job, they had never won a game in school history. So we kind of revamped the program and was coaching out there. And I was coaching a bunch of AAU games one day, and then my brother-in-law, Matt, who's on the boys side over at Episcopal, had called me about the girls' job. And it was just, the perfect timing where I had just started coaching girls at the youth level. So came over to Episcopal, started coaching girls, and I was driving like a madman from World Golf Village to downtown, back and forth. And then the strength and conditioning job came open at Episcopal too. And I was actually at Grayson's wedding when that happened, and they called me and they were like, "Hey, are you interested in the strength job?" I was like, "Yeah." So came back and got hired, I think 2 days before school started last year. So my day-to-day now, I'm actually kind of 3 roles all in one. I'm the strength and conditioning coach, I'm the girls varsity basketball coach and program director, and then the boys weightlifting coach. So I teach 3 classes. I teach some strength and conditioning classes for the high school kids, and then we teach a middle school class called Intro to Sports Performance, which is really fun in a neat class where I can really show the middle school kids what athletic development looks like. So I get a really, really good, well-rounded approach to coaching where I get to coach the girls in the gym, with the football team, baseball team, lacrosse team in the weight room, coaching middle schoolers still. So a little bit of everything. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And talking on that expertise right now of strength specifically, because I think even some of the players we've talked about right before we get on the show that we know through Episcopal, I've asked them, you getting in the weight room? Like, would you want to go up a notch? Like if you go against a guy that's 170, 180 and an inch or two taller than you, you're going to need to pack it on. So What is some advice that you think every young athlete should be doing in the weight room and with their strength to really take their game to the next level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say there's probably 3 things that are really kind of big pillars, big rocks for me when it comes to that. I think number 1 is sleep. I don't think that kids can realize, I know I didn't when I was a young athlete, how powerful sleep is. I think obviously how the studies and research. So, I mean, your body only grows when you sleep. Your body only recovers when you sleep. And I think, the kids sleep on, good pun, that there's between 6 hours to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9. I think that's a huge one. So having a sleep routine before you go to bed and just prioritizing sleep, I think is a big one. I think after that, mobility is a huge one that I think gets overlooked a lot at the high school level. I think, a lot of these kids understand they need to get bigger, they need to get faster, they need to get stronger, but they don't really realize that your mobility is what allows you to do those things. And if you lack mobility, if whether it be hips, knees, ankles, shoulders, if you're not mobile enough, increasing mobility is only going to make you better at your sport. So I think sleep and mobility are probably the main 2. And then the last one, there's a lot of variables we can, manipulate in the weight room. We can manipulate your sets, your reps, your volume, what exercises you're doing, your split. But the one that I think is the easiest is just the intensity. I think so many kids will go in a weight room and they're in there and maybe they're taking Snapchat pictures and their mind's not all the way in, and or they're checking their phone in between sets, and it's like, the ability to set your phone down and just as hard as you possibly can. It doesn't mean every single day you're torturing yourself. That's not what it means. But just having intent and having your intensity be very high. I think those 3 things: sleep, mobility, and intensity. Those are probably the 3 main things I would say.
Just lock in on the training.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is sometimes shocking too, because even I recently found myself when I go to the gym, I try to put my phone on Do Not Disturb just because it's step away for a minute, you've got school, you've got people in your phone, you've got people asking you to do things. It's you could kind of just take that time as even though you're getting intense, it's almost a meditation to just put your phone away, focus on the work that needs to be done in the gym.
Yeah, I think at Episcopal too, especially it's such a high level academic school that these kids are going through basically Ivy League classes, and with how rigorous it is academically, having a space where I can go and just decompress and unwind and, blow some steam off of just lifting weights. And I think that's huge. So being present in the moment, getting your phone away and just locking in is a big time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm definitely with you on the sleep. There's a lot of teams in sports that practice at 6 a.m., which, I think is a lot for these kids and not having a chance to recover. And yeah, kind of the mobility. I think one of the things a lot of high school kids overlook is the importance of stretching. They kind of take for granted, I don't need to. Your body's a little bit more resilient, but, forming that habit early on and preventing injuries. I was curious. So as a coach, what are some of the things that are kind of foundational to who you are and how you coach and kind of the bedrock of how you want to lay your team to start out a season?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. There's there's kind of two things that are happening at once there. I think it's real easy to get caught up in, wanting to win basketball games and win championships and, put kids collegiately at the next level and just make sure you're doing the best for your student athletes. Every year I kind of take a step back at the end of our season. And then when we come back into it, I start to really get into what does player development look like in the offseason for our kids? What's their strength and conditioning routine? What's their skill development routine? Are they doing pickup? Are they playing AAU? What does that look like? And then from there, you get into summer. That's where you can finally start to get on the court with your team and see, okay, who are our pieces this year? And that's kind of where you start lining out your goals of what you're going to be as a team. And then now you get into fall and like you can run some fall league stuff. And about this time where we are in winter, is where, it gets real and we start playing games. We have our first preseason game tonight. So for me, my coaching style on the court, I would say, I try to be very positive. I don't, while I might've responded to it well as a kid, I don't think these kids in this day and age, I just don't think you have to berate them to get the most out of them. I think that style is a little outdated. I try to be more high energy and have the kids feed off my energy. I think ultimately when you build a relationship with a kid and they know that they trust you, you trust them, they can talk to you, you can talk to them and that you believe in them, I think ultimately that's what's going to lead them to success on the court. So I just try to make sure, my girls know I believe in them. I love on them hard. I'm still going to hold them accountable. I have a very high expectation and a standard that, needs to be met. But I think as long as you're transparent and communicative up front, that's the best way they respond. But on the flip side of that is it's real easy to get caught up in, the basketball. Did we win tonight? Did we lose tonight? What's our record? And I think ultimately, sports are a setting where we can just better ourselves as humans. And it's honestly one of the few things we have left in society where you can really work on all the characteristics that make you successful. And whether it be teamwork, just competitive spirit, work ethic. So, for me, it definitely have to kind of realign my goals with what other goals is these kids have. And, I know that I'm coaching, the whether it be in the weight room or the basketball court, the future fathers and mothers, future husbands and wives, future leaders of our community. So am I doing everything I can to make sure, whether they're the best player on the team or the worst, whether they're a high level athlete or maybe, more average, are they getting the opportunities to form those characteristics that are going to make them successful in life? Do they learn determination? Do they learn relentless work ethic? So those are kind of the things that are my goals with our teams and what I try to pride myself on as a coach.
Yeah, I love that. And is there any way that you kind of coach differently the leaders on your team?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit more, I don't want to say hands off, but I ultimately think I failed early on as a coach where I wanted it more than some of my early teams at the youth level, all different teams. And ultimately you're only going to go as far as your team wants you to go. So I think with your leaders, you got to empower them. You got to let them know, listen, my voice is important, but your voice is much more important. And, whether it be giving them specific assignments, I know with our kids, there's a lot of small little things that get really overlooked. I think, who's a captain, who's not. I think that's powerful. I think, them having a say in little things about the uniforms and what uniforms we're going to order for next year or the pregame music and those kind of things. Those are all things that they really do enjoy out of their experience. So I think a lot of things that I would make decisions as a coach normally and just like, this is the way it goes. I kind of delegate to my leaders and say, look, what is it that you guys want? And I think that just makes our relationship even stronger to where I in practice, I'm pushing them hard. But when we get to the games, it's them. It's all them. It's them huddling each other up. It's them talking to each other. It's them kind of strategically planning out games. So I'm probably a little bit different than most coaches where I know in the past I wasn't as successful as I could be because I try to do too much where it's, ultimately it's on them. So I try to make it to where our leaders feel empowered that they're in control of the situation.
And from your days as an athlete to now as a coach working on campus at Episcopal, I wanted to ask you about balance, but as you really understand, it can be very imbalanced. So from your days as an athlete playing sports, balancing school, casual, girlfriend, all of that to now as a coach, more of like a professional doing all these different things. How do you dance among this balance, and what are some things that you really try to focus on to make sure that like you're giving the most to your team, and then also, you're married as well, and when you're at home?
Yeah. I try to really be strategic with my time management. I think that's a huge skill that I was lucky enough to have to learn early as an athlete, but now later in life as a coach, it's huge for me. And I can easily see when I get out of balance. It's pretty obvious. If I get, I'm obsessed when it comes to basketball. Like I always want to do whatever I can to help our team. So a lot of late nights watching film, a lot of early mornings getting in the gym, and anything we can do to help put our kids in a better situation to succeed, I'm going to do. But sometimes you get so focused on it, so locked in on it, that you forget to take care of yourself. And I'm guilty of, I'll be underfed, I'll be underslept, and I got to make sure I'm putting in time in those areas. And I think for me, I try to divide my life into buckets, and what's my spiritual bucket look like? What's my family bucket look like? Then, my job, and then my hobbies. And I think having activities for you as an individual where you can kind of go and be present in that moment. Honestly, again, unplanned, but I had a friend who did jujitsu pretty heavy, and she was a good family friend of ours, and she had begged me a ton of times when I was playing, you got to come do it. You got to come do it. I'm just like, I can't right now. I'm playing basketball. And finally, when I hung him up, she just passionate me enough. I was like, okay, I'll try it out. And I went to a jiu-jitsu class and was getting choked out by high school kids and females, and definitely humbled me big time. So that was a few years back, and now I've kind of dabbled in a few different martial arts and just been training MMA pretty heavy now, where I've been boxing quite a bit, jiu-jitsu, a little bit of kickboxing. So that's kind of become my competitive fix, outside of basketball. But obviously, moments with loved ones, I think my wife is who centers me and grounds me. I couldn't do anything I do without her. And just planning ahead of, we want a family here soon, and spending a lot of time, with the people around that, one day you're going to look back and wish, I spent more time with those people. So being able to manage your time and just know, where do I need to fill my cup in other areas?
Yeah. And maybe preparing for a WWE run again, we'll see, right?
Well, who knows?
I wanted to ask too, so what are you, obviously you're big into working out and your health. So what are some of the key adjustments that you've made, preparing your body and your life, not just for basketball, but just for a person, like whether it's, diet parts of your routine that are just non-negotiables for you at this point?
Yeah. Nutrition for sure is a huge one. And I think when people hear nutrition, they think, Tupperware, grilled chicken, white rice, and broccoli. And it's like, that's not what nutrition is. I think when you adopt a more holistic approach, I always, try to teach my kids food has different values, right? So food has nutritional value, it has financial value, but also has hedonistic value. And that means, if I'm at my, 5-year-old cousin's birthday party, that I'm not some weirdo that's eating spinach and carrots. Like I can have a slice of cake, and just being in a balance with that. And then that same holistic approach, applying it to your training. I've gone down a lot of different endeavors where I've only pursued strength and tried to, max PR, my deadlift, my bench, my squat. I've gone down other endeavors where aesthetics were my main goal. How little body fat can I get down to? And I think when you do those things, they're fun to see, okay, how far can I push myself? But if you're so focused on one area, you're probably neglecting others. So for me now, where my number one priority is my ultimate health is, one day I hope to be a father. Am I going to be healthy enough to take care of my family, take care of my kids and my wife? And then after that, what are the things in a day that I want to be successful at? And for me, it's coaching. And it's just, right now it's martial arts. So a holistic approach where I'm doing strength training, I'm doing cardio, I'm doing a lot of mobility, but then things that aren't even necessarily pushing your body, but more relaxation, a lot of yoga, a lot of meditation, but having a holistic approach where you don't just get caught up in one endeavor. I think that's probably the biggest thing.
And just out of curiosity, back when you were preparing for WWE potentially, 6'8", 280, what type of weight were you throwing around at that time? Because I'm assuming you've never been that heavy again.
No, that was the heaviest I've been. And it was good and bad. It was strong enough. I started, my favorite lift is my deadlift. I got in the low 5s there for a little bit, and probably not that high right now, probably more high 4s. But I also would get winded after walking up a flight of stairs. So it's give and take. But yeah, my squat and my bench was something that kind of came secondary behind my deadlift. But I got really into like the world's strongest man stuff with Brian Shaw and those guys when I was kind of training that way. And it was a lot of fun, but ultimately too much of one thing can be a bad thing. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember right now. I was in the Denver airport in August, and I met Eddie Hall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, dude, it was crazy. I was walking around, and we're like trying to figure out how to get out of the Denver airport, and we go the wrong way like 3 times, and then I turn around, and he's right there walking to me, and I was like, Eddie Hall, and he's like, "Oh, what's up, mate?" And I just keeps walking. I was like, "Ugh." And I guess he was doing the same thing, lost, confused, whatever. He's clearly in a bad mood. So it was funny. He's all angry walking around. I'm like, "Can I get a picture real quick?" He's like, yeah. Come on, hurry, mate. Make it quick. Shoots a good smile and then walks off. And I'll never forget watching him walk off. The dude's calves.
Oh, man.
Basketballs.
Yeah.
Just insane. If you've never seen someone like a strong man, they just look like nothing you've ever seen. They don't look like football players. They don't look like basketball players or anything. It's just totally different build.
Yeah.
Anyway, funny story, meeting Eddie Hall. I want to ask you next, talking about coaching, talking about having a family, what would you really like to see come into fruition over these next 10 years, 20 years, and what you see next for yourself?
It's a great question. To be honest, it's hard sometimes to put goals in yourself because I think, while goals are great and you want something you're working towards to have direction so you're not just going any way, I've realized in my past events in different chapters of my life, it never goes as planned. If when I was, a high school player at Providence and dreams of playing in the NBA, if you would have told me, you're going to be a girls basketball coach at Episcopal, I would have been like, no way. So I think God reveals to me every day, every year that, my path and my journey is up to him ultimately. So just making sure I'm watering those seeds that need to be watered in all aspects of my life. But I do have goals. Obviously a family is a main goal of mine. Any program that I'm involved with, whether it be girls basketball, strength and conditioning, boys weightlifting, I want to see those programs succeed. I think, one for me, even though I'm very early in my coaching career, already I'm seeing kids that I've coached, at different levels go on to be very successful in not just basketball or not just, sports, but a lot of different aspects of life. I got to coach a kid last year that she went on to be our valedictorian. She's at Dartmouth now and just one of the many, many great kids I've got to coach. So I think for me, I just picture, towards the end of my coaching career, just being around all these kids that at one point or another I was blessed to impact. I think that's probably the thing that I think about the most. But then obviously, from a coaching standpoint, you do have, different championships and stuff. I think winning a district championship at our school, it hasn't been done in over 20 years. So that's a big goal of ours. And ultimately getting a chance to go back to Lakeland and compete for a state championship. I was lucky enough to win 2 of them in high school. So I think to do it as a coach, and show these kids how fun that experience is, I think that would be another big one. But with the martial arts stuff, I don't know. I'm just kind of taking it day by day and seeing what happens.
Yeah. It's interesting with sports because it's, especially in coaching, it's like you get the immediate gratification, but you also get the delayed gratification, like you said, seeing these kids that you've known and worked with. And so I was going to ask, I mean, is there anything like in the business world that you feel like you potentially have an interest in, or do you feel like, hey, I just want to go all in on coaching and kind of see where this takes me?
Yeah, I think they kind of overlap a little bit. So I started a club basketball program called Wings, Jack's Wings, and it really last year was when we started, and it was really just taking our middle school team from Episcopal and in the off season, giving them a place where they can play travel ball in AAU, and then this year we started getting more into like skill development training, where I had kids from all over the city, whether they be at bowls or reball, training with us in the off season. So I think that's something that as our coaching career keeps going, I have, really, really great staff around me at Episcopal. Coach Allen, Coach Sowers, Coach Frazley, and Coach Halverson are tremendous. And I've been lucky enough to be around a lot of different people that have like-minded goals. So I think, the dream of being a high level coach and having, a side business that, you can obviously, you want to be able to support your family, but you're still doing the thing that you love to do. I think that's the ultimate dream. So, where that goes to, whether it be, travel ball or just skill development, or maybe one day back into the strength and conditioning thing too. I think that's probably my primary business goal.
I love it.
Wyatt, we've just got one more question for you. I don't know if you had a chance to look up our grit creed that we were talking about. So if you're good for that. So we ask everyone this question, as you saw, 12 principles that our company is really built on that we believe every person could lead their life by. So my last question for you is, what part of the grit creed resonates most with you and why?
Yeah. It's a great creed. I read it a few times, and there was some in there that I really liked, fighting through adversity, having a mantra, resilience. Those things were great. But I think that last very end of just a purpose bigger than yourself, I think ultimately, that's the thing that wakes you up in the morning. That's the thing that you're doing a good job, and whatever you're doing is knowing, look, when I leave here, there's another place I'm going to. This is not, just all about me. I think if you get to a point where you lack that purpose, I think that's where it can be a dangerous spot and people can really struggle. And I think just understanding, it's something bigger than yourself. I think that's what truly gives people the satisfaction of their work and leads them to live a life obviously bigger than them. So that's the part of the creed that resonated the most with me.
That's why I said mine was too. I feel like it's always a good cornerstone when all else goes wrong in your life. 99% of everything goes wrong. That 1% is just, well, what could I go do for somebody else? So, Wyatt, it's been great having you on today, man. We really appreciate you, everything you're doing at Episcopal. Brian, any closing remarks?
Really enjoyed having you today. For sure.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure that everyone gets a chance to listen to this one. So that's a wrap for us here today at the Grit.org podcast. Check out our other episodes. Leave us a comment. Tell us something you enjoyed about Wyatt's story. Share it with someone you think it would resonate with or impact. As always, we appreciate you tuning in for another episode of the Grit.org podcast.